You're listening to the Alchemical Tech Revolution, and I am your host, Wayne McRoy. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Tonight, we're going to delve a little bit into a subject that has been all over the news media, especially some of the alternative news media, over the course of the past several months now, since its discovery in July. And this topic we're going to speak about is something called 3I Atlas. That's right, folks. This is an interstellar object that has been spotted by scientists and has been speculated with the potential of being some type of an extraterrestrial artificial craft of some sort. I'm not kidding about this. This is stuff that has been all over the news media. There's all sorts of speculation about this. And of course, many of the sources of officialdom will say, well, there's nothing to that. It is just a comet, but it's an interstellar comet, and it has characteristics that aren't consistent with things we've seen in the past. Well, I'm here to tell you there's more to the story than what they're letting on. There are many esoteric connotations attached to this news story, and we're going to touch on that a little bit tonight. 3I Atlas. What is this, you may ask? And perhaps you haven't really been following this, and maybe you have heard a little something about it. It's all over the UFO circle as of late as well. There's been a lot of speculation about it, as I've said. And where does this speculation come from? Well, the speculation surrounding this interstellar object, as they like to call it, is all focused on one particular individual who first began talking about it, and his name is Avi Loeb. So who is this Avi Loeb? We're going to look a little bit into his background as to who he is, and then we're going to go ahead and explain what it is that we're talking about here with this 3I Atlas. What is it? Who's the guy that first brought it to the attention of the alternative media in particular, and the mainstream media also, in particular circles? Who is this guy? Well, Avi Loeb. Let's get into a little bit of his background here, and we'll know a little bit something more about what could be garnered about this whole story. Avi Loeb, Abraham Avi Loeb, born February 26, 1962, is an Israeli and American theoretical physicist who works on astrophysics and cosmology. Loeb is the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University, where since 2007 he has been director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at the Center for Astrophysics. He chaired the Department of Astronomy from 2011 to 2020 and founded the Black Hole Initiative in 2016. This guy also founded a program called the Galileo Project, where it explores the potential of many of these objects spotted in space, these things such as comets, asteroids, meteors, all of the above, any type of these objects as being of potentially extraterrestrial origin, artificial origins. So he founded this project in order to look into that, and he was one of the primary people who studied this phenomenon known as Oumuamua back in 2017. Do you remember Oumuamua? This was another interstellar object that entered into our solar system that they were keeping a close eye on because this was the first object from outside of our solar system that had ever been witnessed by modern science within our solar system. And they wanted to keep a close eye on this. They had a huge interest in interstellar objects. So let's get a little bit into the background of that before we get into 3I Atlas and what this is all about. There are two previous interstellar objects that have been spotted until now, until the discovery of this 3I Atlas. There were only these two other ones that have ever been witnessed and documented and things recorded about. The first of which was called Oumuamua. In December of 2016, Loeb cited Oumuamua's unusually elongated shape as one of the reasons why the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia should listen for radio emissions from it to see if there were any unexpected signs that it might be of artificial origins. Although earlier limited observations by other radio telescopes such as SETI's Institute's Allen Telescope Array, had produced no such results. The Green Bank Telescope observed the asteroid for 6 hours, detecting no radio signals. So, for some reason or another, Avi Loeb, this professor, for some reason or another, he was extremely interested in trying to ascribe extraterrestrial origins and perhaps artificial origins to some of these interstellar objects. He wanted to make sure they weren't emitting any types of signals, that there was no associated connection to perhaps an intelligence being involved with this. And he started, of course, with this Oumuamua, and from there, he investigated various other things. Now, as we had just stated previous, Loeb was the founder of the Galileo Project. He founded the Galileo Project in July of 2021 for the systematic scientific search for evidence of extraterrestrial technological artifacts. The project was inspired by the detection of Oumuamua and by release of the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence report on unidentified aerial phenomena. As stated on the project's website, the aim of the project is, quote, "Given the recently discovered abundance of Earth-Sun systems, the Galileo Project is dedicated to the proposition that humans can no longer ignore the possible existence of extraterrestrial technological civilizations, also called ETCs for short, and that science should not dogmatically reject potential extraterrestrial explanations because of social stigma or cultural preferences, factors which are not conducive to the scientific method of unbiased empirical inquiry. We now must dare to look through new telescopes, both literally and figuratively," end quote. That is what the Galileo Project is about, and you may notice, if you've been listening to this broadcast for any length of time, you may have picked up on some of the hidden language in their statement. The word dare, for instance. I would urge you to go back and look at the works of one Mr. Pascal Beverly Randolph and understand what the word dare is all about. If you haven't done so, go explore this way of thinking, and you will find that there is a hidden underlying meaning to this notion of dare, and it has everything to do with the occult and with the underpinnings of the esoteric in this language being spoken here. Is this really what they're looking for? Extraterrestrial, in my view, is coded language. It could mean any number of things. In its broadest definition, it means from beyond the Earth. So it's not totally incorrect to ascribe extraterrestrial as a descriptor to something that comes from beyond the Earth. But there's a lot of attached connotation to this as well. And you'll notice that this Galileo Project had a particular interest in these interstellar objects, particularly Oumuamua, and since then there was a second one. I believe this one was named Borisov. It was number 2. It was I-2 Borisov, if my memory serves me correctly. My mistake, it's not I-2 Borisov. It's listed as 2I Borisov. That's Borisov. Comet Borisov. 2I Borisov, originally designated C2019 Q4, is the first observed rogue comet and the second observed interstellar interloper after Oumuamua. It was discovered by the Crimean amateur astronomer and telescope maker Gennady Borisov on August 29, 2019 in Margot Observatory. So this second object, interstellar object, was called 2I Borisov officially, and this was a comet that came from outside of our solar system. It was said to be an interstellar object, much like Oumuamua. Nothing ever came of the observations of Oumuamua, but there was a lot of speculation at the time, and still today, that it may have been the remains or remnant of some type of an extraterrestrial technology. Now, Avi Loeb was at the center of these speculations back then, and he's at the center of the speculations about this 3I Atlas object that we are now going to be concerned with. I don't want to spend way too much time getting into the background details of Avi Loeb and these other two objects, but this is where this whole Galileo project stems from. It's from these observations of these interstellar objects for the first time in human history, recorded human history that we know of anyway, where we have seen interstellar objects enter into our system that are visible to us here on Earth, and we can make observations about that. And this guy seems fascinated and almost obsessed with the notion of detecting traces of extraterrestrial civilizations and technologies coming from outside of our solar system. What are they looking for, and what is being talked about here covertly in the secret language of their communication systems hidden away here? Well, it's hard to tell for sure. But let's find out more about this particular object that they are calling 3I Atlas and why it is that it has come to have that name. This object was initially discovered on July 1st of this year, 2025, July 1st, and they've been observing it since, and it's had some unusual characteristics. Coming October 21st, 2025, the interstellar object known as 3I Atlas will be exactly on the opposite side of the Sun relative to Earth, constituting a so-called solar conjunction. Going to pause for a moment. So this is being recorded on the 20th of October. So tomorrow, according to what mainstream science is telling us, this object will form a solar conjunction tomorrow. So look for some type of a major news event tomorrow. I find it interesting and compelling that the date is October 21st for this conjunction, always with the number 7, and 21 is the 777. So look for some kind of a catalyzing world event tomorrow. Not saying something will definitely happen, but I find it intriguing that this object just so will happen to align at that time, in conjunction with the number 7, and of course October with the 7 is an important connection to be made esoterically, because what happened on October the 7th in 2023, well, did we not have that infamous event happen in Gaza that kicked off this war? And then, not 2 years later, a little over 2 years later, on October 14th of this year, 2025, a ceasefire deal was crafted by President Trump as well as the others in Egypt, of all places. This is where they signed the agreement and declaration, and the hostages were released and all of this, and now we see here now, several days later, that, of course, they're not following through with this ceasefire, as we knew they would not. Hasn't even been a full week yet. But tomorrow marks 1 week since then, the 21st. So the 7, the 14, and the 21, important in world events. The 777. You can always count on these things, always having numeric encodings. And, of course, this 3I Atlas object will be conjunct with the Sun relative to Earth tomorrow, on that day. So it says, when you look up towards the sky that day, keep in mind that 3I Atlas is hiding behind the Sun. Another important connotation here. Hiding behind the Sun. Under these circumstances, it is impossible to observe 3I Atlas with Earth-based telescopes even shortly after sunset. Was this hideout planned as an opportune time for technological action? Going to pause for a moment. This is coming directly from an article from Medium magazine, which was written here by Avi Loeb himself. So he's asking the question, was this hideout planned as an opportune time for technological action? Now, of course, he's implying that perhaps this is an extraterrestrial technological object that is planning some such thing. But if you could read between the lines, you can maybe know some things. Maybe there is some type of a technological action planned. And of course, as I'm recording this here today, there has been a major disruption on the eastern coast of the United States in many internet utilities as Amazon Web Services has a major outage right now. So is there something technological happening? I don't think we could necessarily ascribe that to extraterrestrials, but you could see what the implication is here. You could see how they always use this hidden type of language to communicate ideas. In astronautics, the optimal point for a maneuver to speed up or slow down a spacecraft is at closest approach to a massive object. An impulse in the direction of the peak velocity or opposite to it would maximize the gain or loss of kinetic energy. As a result of this so-called Oberth effect, it is most energy efficient for a spacecraft engine to burn its fuel when its orbital velocity is greatest. The velocity impulse from gas escaping the exhaust is analogous to the so-called Hill's mechanism for the production of hypervelocity stars out of the tidal breakup of a binary system by a supermassive black hole, theoretically predicted and observationally confirmed, according to the article. So all of this is speculative nonsense, first and foremost. You don't know if this is truly an extraterrestrial craft, how the propulsion system works, or if it needs to burn fuel, or if it's going to utilize this slingshot effect that they always ascribe in science fiction to large gravitational bodies of sorts to get things done. This is all speculative. And this is all being invoked here. They're trying to sound very science-y about it. This is what gets me. They always like to put on the appearance that they know oh so much about this universe in which we live in, and they have it all figured out, and they know the mechanics of how this works, when quite simply put, they don't really understand the mechanics of how cosmology works, but they pretend to. And they think by utilizing our modern physics, our modern aspect or approach to physics, they could explain some of these things in a way that stands up to what they've laid down as the official narrative for stuff. And certainly, if you look at what NASA has to say about this object, they say it's a natural object. But Mr. Loeb here tends to disagree. He thinks it's got the hallmarks of some type of a remnant of a technological thing. So when will the optimal time be to observe this three-eye atlas doing these alleged Oberth maneuvers? It says only 8 days after it reaches this solar conjunction, which will be on the 21st. So on the 29th of October, 2025, Three-Eye Atlas will reach a perihelion distance of 203 million kilometers. This opportune time happens to be during the same period when it is hidden from view to Earth-based telescopes. Was this a mere coincidence or a result of orbital design and basic astronautics? Going to pause for a moment. So now the implication Mr. Loeb is trying to make here is that this may be an intelligently guided extraterrestrial craft that sought to keep itself hidden from Earth-based telescopes. They don't want us to see it coming. But yet here we are, we're observing this thing anyway. We know it's out there. Anyway, I digress on that point. You could speculate about this all you want. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not dismissing the possibility of extraterrestrial life out there in the cosmos. I just don't think that this object or this event that we're looking at equates to that, and there is something more esoteric being inferred here. And we'll get to that. I'll connect some dots for you as we go. Let's go ahead and continue. So now the article here continues, and it says, science is guided by evidence and not by expectations. We can find the answer to the above question by monitoring the sky during November and December of 2025 and searching for any unusual activity of Three-Eye Atlas or any new objects that come out of it. Over a period of months after perihelion, the tidal force from the sun would separate the trajectories of objects that were thrusted out of Three-Eye Atlas with velocity kicks. Going to pause for a moment. So the implication being made here is, well, maybe it's a comet, and maybe pieces of it will break off, and we could observe those. Or maybe this is a mothership and smaller ships will break off of it, and perhaps these will be scout ships or some such thing that are going to come here to Earth. Do you see the implications being made here? Do you understand the information being conveyed? This is a story. They're crafting a narrative. And this fellow, Avi Loeb, is at the center of this narrative, and he is a well-esteemed scientist. He is well-known. He's a smart guy, don't get me wrong, and I think maybe he truly believes in what he's doing. But there's always hidden messaging, whether he realizes it or not, within these stories, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we progress here. You'll begin to connect the dots yourself when you hear some more of the details, and the devil's always in the details, right? Given the minimum diameter of 5 kilometers for 3I Atlas, as derived by some of the studies they've done, the solar illumination at perihelion would deliver more than, get this, 33 gigawatts of power to its surface. 33 gigawatts of power to its surface, namely at least a third of the total power generated by 94 operating commercial nuclear reactors in the U.S., the largest producer of nuclear power in the world. Gonna pause for a moment. So this thing is going to put off an awful lot of energy, 33 gigawatts or gigawatts. All I know is in Back to the Future, Doc Brown pronounced it gigawatts, 1.21 gigawatts. This is significantly more than that. So that being said, we're given a little bit of messaging here. Of course, the number 33 is present. And the number 94, this is producing as much power as is generated by 94 operating commercial nuclear reactors. 94 in basic numerology breaks down to the number 13. You know, the number of death and rebirth, the phoenix. At any rate, I digress on that point. Let's continue into the article and see what other information we could garner from this, and we'll see why it is that many are speculating that this is not just a comet or some type of an asteroid or meteor or some type of a natural phenomenon, why they think it might be some type of an artificial phenomenon. As of now, 3I Atlas appears most likely to be a natural comet, but the remote possibility of an Oberth maneuver must be considered seriously as a black swan event with a small probability because of its huge implications for humanity. Since its discovery on July 1st, 2025, 3I Atlas was ranked a 4 on the Loeb scale because of 8 anomalies. Gonna pause for a moment. So the Loeb scale, I guess, is a scale that this Avi Loeb fellow and his Galileo project use to rate different interstellar objects or different types of spaceborne objects to determine whether or not there's the potential for it to be an artificially created object. And this scored a 4 on that scale. I'm not really familiar with what levels on this Loeb scale look like, but there were 8 definitive properties that were being observed about this object that have led to the speculation that it may be some type of an extraterrestrial technology. And here are these 8 anomalies. Number 1, the trajectory of 3I Atlas is aligned within 5 degrees with the ecliptic plane of the planets around the Sun. Number 2, 3I Atlas showed a sunward jet, also called an anti-tail for a comet, that is not an optical illusion from geometric perspective, unlike familiar comets. Going to pause for a moment. So its tail is backwards, which does not align with what they think they know about physics. So do you see, there's a lot of different assumptions being made around this as well. But this is the first time they've observed this anti-tail, a sunward jet, one that goes towards the sun. In all the other instances of observation of comets, the tails were always faced away from the sun. This one points towards it. So this is an unusual characteristic that this thing has displayed. Number 3, 3I Atlas is about 1,000,000 times more massive than Oumuamua and 1,000 times more massive than 2I Borisov, while moving faster than both. Number 4, the arrival time of 3I Atlas allows it to pass within tens of millions of kilometers from Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, and be unobservable from Earth at perihelion. Number 5, the gas plume around 3I Atlas contains much more nickel than iron, as found in industrial-produced nickel alloys, and a nickel-to-cyanide ratio that is orders of magnitude larger than all known comets, including 2I Borisov. Going to pause for a moment. So this is one of the major characteristics that has led to the speculation that this may be some type of an extraterrestrial technology, because this alloy of nickel has only been observed in man-made objects. It does not occur naturally. So this has been one of the major telling points that has led to this speculation. Let's continue. Number 6. The gas plume of 3I Atlas contains only 4% water by mass, a primary constituent of familiar comets. Number 7. 3I Atlas showed extreme negative polarization, unprecedented for all known comets, including 2I Borisov. And number 8. 3I Atlas arrived from a direction coincident with the radio WOW signal to within 9 degrees. And I'm going to pause for a moment. Do you remember hearing about what they call the WOW signal? Well, there's been a lot of speculation that this 3I Atlas, it came from the same direction, and it may be the source of the WOW signal that we received in 1977. If you're not familiar with the story, let's talk about that. Was the WOW signal emitted from 3I Atlas? The WOW signal was detected on August 15, 1977, at a strong narrowband radio signal by Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope. Its origin was inferred to be extraterrestrial. The latest natural explanation hypothesized that the WOW signal was caused by a sudden brightening of the hydrogen line emitted from an interstellar cloud triggered by a strong transient radio source, such as a flare from a highly magnetized neutron star, or a magnetar as they're called. So this is the explanation that they've tried to level for this WOW signal. It defied all known phenomenon at that time, all known phenomena of radio signals at that time, and still today it hasn't been adequately explained, but they're saying this is the most likely explanation of it. But of course now we have this interstellar object approaching from that same direction, and they think, and this is also from Avi Loeb, this article that I'm reading from about the WOW signal is also from Avi Loeb and how it connects to this 3I Atlas. The WOW signal originated from the sky coordinates of right ascension, 19 hours, 25 minutes, 291 degrees, and declination of 27 degrees. On August 12, 1977, the interstellar object, 3I Atlas, was at a distance of about 600 times the Earth-Sun separation, corresponding to a light travel time of about 3 days. It had the sky coordinates of 19 hours 40 minutes, 295 degrees, and 19 degrees declination. These parameters can be inferred accurately given the lack of non-gravitational acceleration for 3I Atlas, as inferred by Mr. Loeb's paper that he wrote about this. Hence, the WOW signal was separated by approximately 4 degrees in RA and 8 degrees in declination from the direction of 3I Atlas. The chance of 2 random directions in the sky being aligned to that level is about 0.6%. So it's a very small percent that this is a chance, a random coincidence, that signal derived from the same place in space as this interstellar object. That's what's being inferred here. So he says, if the WOW signal originated from 3I Atlas, how powerful was the transmitter? The detected intensity of the WOW signal was in the range of 54 to 212 Jansky with a bandwidth of about 10 kilohertz. At the distance of 600 astronomical units, this corresponds to a source power of 0.5 to 2 gigawatts, the output of a typical nuclear reactor on Earth. Gonna pause for a moment, and more likely 1.21 gigawatts would probably be the precise measurement that they would go with if they were going to make a precision estimate here. I would bet money on that if they were to make a more precise type of estimate of the power that this transmitter would have to put out, it would probably be something to the line of 1.21 gigawatts. Interesting how all these things always seem to add up, isn't it? Anyway, so we had this wow signal, and it came from the same direction and the relative same point in space that they calculated this 3i Atlas would have been at that time in 1977. So this leads to a lot more speculation about things. So we have all of these different ideas being inferred by Avi Loeb and by others in the scientific mainstream community talking about this, as well as the ufology circles and all around and around in the alternative media. There's all kinds of speculations, and there's nothing that could really positively be identified as true in any of these speculations at this point. It's a wait-and-see type of a game with this stuff, and I'm sure it'll probably amount to nothing after it's all said and done. But I'm more concerned with the esoteric messaging involved in this. That's what I'm concerned with. But at any rate, let's finish up this short article here, and we'll go ahead and begin to connect some dots for you. So it says here, gladly, we expect to get data on 3i Atlas shortly after perihelion. On November 4th, 2025, the European Space Agency's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, also known as JUICE, can't make up these names, folks, it's ridiculous, JUICE, will pass within 64 million kilometers from 3i Atlas. If 3i Atlas will maintain a trajectory shaped by gravity only, it will get closest to Earth on December 19th, 2025, at a distance of 269 million kilometers. On March 16th, 2026, 3i Atlas will pass within 54 million kilometers from Jupiter and be observable to sensors in the ultraviolet, infrared, and radio bands on board the Juno spacecraft, as recommended scientifically and politically. Alien tech masquerading as a natural comet. Halloween will be on October 31st, 2025, 2 days after the perihelion date of 3i Atlas. Here's hoping that the coming months will bring sufficient information to determine the true nature of 3i Atlas. In a blind date of interstellar proportions, we better observe the other side as much as possible before having an opinion or raising expectations for an engagement. And that's the end of the article. And you'll notice there's an awful lot of other stuff encoded in this article, and I find it very interesting, of course, that the author of this article, which of course was Avi Loeb, just so happens to mention that 2 days after the perihelion date of 3i Atlas would be Halloween. You know, the high satanic holiday known as Samhain. I digress on that point, though, but of course, all these things always correspond with these particular events and times, don't they? It's intriguing that we always seem to get these events aligning in their time frame with important things of this nature. So only time will really tell what happens with all of this, but there's a lot of messaging involved here. That's the thing I find compelling about this. There's hidden messages in the text here, in these scientific articles. What are they referring to? Well, first of all, Why do they call this thing 3I Atlas? Because it's the third interstellar comet ever detected, or the third interstellar object ever detected in our solar system. And it was discovered by what's called the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, also known as ATLAS. It's a station at Rio Hurtado, Chile, and it was discovered on July 1st, 2025. Well, it was entering the inner solar system at a distance of 4.5 astronomical units from the Sun. It says the comet follows an unbound hyperbolic trajectory past the Sun with a very fast hyperbolic excess velocity of 36 miles per second. 36 miles per second. Pay attention to the numbers here, relative to the Sun. And of course it says 3I Atlas will not come closer than 1.8 astronomical units to Earth. 1.8, there's your 18, your triple sixes again. First of all, 36 miles, 3 sixes, 18, also 3 sixes, to Earth. So it poses no threat. It is the third interstellar object confirmed passing through the solar system, after first of all what's known as 1I, Oumuamua, and 2I, Borisov, and it says hence the prefix 3I, the number 3 and the letter I. And if you want to do the math, again, if you want to infer the numerological significance and symbology present, 3I, what's the I? It is the 9th letter of the alphabet. So 3 I's or 3 9s, these are your upside down sixes. There's your triple six again, the mirror inversion of it being represented here. So they got you both coming and going with the triple six. Always present in these types of things, and of course most people will scoff and say it's coincidence. Is it really coincidence? It's amazing how many of these things, well, the numbers always add up in that way. And some would say you're just reading more into it than what's really there. You could make any of these things work however you want if you take that kind of a tact with it with the numbers, and it's all nonsense. Well, I would urge people, look into the old systems of gematria and numerology and know that these things are significant, and oftentimes they are inherent in some of these major events and news stories, and they're there on purpose, and they do have a very real inherent energy to them. You could dismiss it all you want, but how many of these things do you have to see in these types of events before you stop dismissing it all as coincidence? I digress on that point. But thus, the prefix 3I, it is not expected to brighten enough to become visible in binoculars or to the naked eye. During solar conjunction on the 21st of October 2025, the comet can be observed by the GOES 19 weather satellite. Going to pause for a moment. The GOES 19 weather satellite. The whole narrative here is this is a very unusual object. It is going to have a conjunction with the sun on October 21st. That's tomorrow from recording of this. So this, in essence, to anyone who studies astrology or some of the related teachings of Hermetic principles and things of that nature, can tell you that this will cause some type of a disruption in the energetic signatures that are hitting or striking the earth from the sky on that date. And that this creates a very interesting type of a situation. And you could go back and you could look at the nature of comets in the past, how they've always been heralded as harbingers of doom in many of the stories. Many cultures in the past look at comets as a type of a sign, usually of some type of negative occurrence, but a sign of change, of transformation, always with this stuff. And that's what this is said to be, a comet. And it's going to be in conjunction with the sun. It's going to be hidden behind the sun. So don't you know, if you look for it, you'll be blinded by the light. And you just thought it was a clever song lyric that led to a lot of the other song lyrics that came afterwards to being misconstrued. But that's a subject for another day. I digress on that point as well. I'm digressing a lot tonight, aren't I? That's okay. You could explore these avenues of thought a little bit more on your own, should you feel the need to do so. But I find it intriguing that there's always these types of pop culture connections inferred in these types of news stories, at any rate. But anyway, back to some of the esoteric encoding. You could look at the numbers, just in particular, within these news articles, and you could explore some of the things that I've spoke of about the symbology present, particularly in the news articles. But let's get to the more obvious side of it. This thing's named 3-Eye Atlas, and you'll notice that the episode image and the title of the episode tells you in no uncertain terms that the letter I represents the sensory organ, the eye. In this instance, there's a reason for that, because this is encoding that for those with eyes to see, you can know something more about this object, the speculations about this object, and things that it may herald the coming of in this world. And of course, we're going to relate this back to the mythological story of Atlas. Atlas in Greek mythology. Atlas was the son of the Titan, Iapetus, and of the Oceanid Clymene, or Asia, and the brother of Prometheus, the creator of humankind. Gonna pause for a moment. What other types of connotations can we infer from this story that perhaps this is an extraterrestrial craft entering our solar system, knowing now that Atlas is the brother of Prometheus, the creator of mankind, of humankind? Think about the implications thereof and some of the ideas that they want to put out there into the zeitgeist with this. And of course, if you go back and watch the Alien movie franchise, particularly the one called Prometheus, you might begin to connect some more dots here. Let's continue here. What else do we know about Atlas? In Homer's Odyssey, Book 1, Atlas seems to have been a marine creature who supported the pillars that held heaven and earth apart. These were thought to rest in the sea immediately beyond the most western horizon, but later the name of Atlas was transferred to a range of mountains in northwestern Africa. Atlas was subsequently represented as the king of that district, turned into a rocky mountain by the hero Perseus, who, to punish Atlas for his inhospitality, showed him the Gorgon's head, the sight of which turned men to stone. According to Hesiod's Theogony, Atlas was one of the Titans who took part in their war against Zeus, for which, as a punishment, he was condemned to hold aloft the heavens. In many works of art, he is represented as carrying the heavens, or the celestial globe, on his shoulders. Interesting, isn't it? Do you understand some of the connotations involved here? Atlas holds the heavens in place, holds the earth in place, and the underworld in place under his feet. The world mountain. Atlas is the world mountain, or the world pole, as talked about in some of the ancient literature, the Hermetic doctrines, and the doctrines of the Kabbalah, among other things. You see, Atlas is the central pillar, representing the invisible pillar, the middle path of the Kabbalic tree of life. You have, of course, those other two poles, represented in Freemasonry as the pillars Joaquin and Boaz at the gate. But the middle pillar is invisible and holds aloft the vault of the sky. It's also called the keystone or the royal arch. Atlas represents this in the old myth. Atlas holds the heavens apart from the earth and from the underworld. And what happens when Atlas leaves his post? Well, you have traditions that talk about the collapse of the world pole. And do you know when this happens in some of those traditions, ladies and gentlemen? Well, it happens right around the time of the winter solstice, December 21st, and I don't find it coincidental that the best view we're going to get of this 3-eye Atlas object will be on the 19th of December, around that time frame, where in some of the cultures of the past, they explored this avenue of thought where their tradition has been that on the winter solstice for 3 days, the world pole collapses, and that it needs to be rebuilt once again. And on the third day afterwards, on the 25th of December, it is put back in its place, but for a time, spiritual powers are loosed upon the earth that don't necessarily belong on the earth during that time period. And this, of course, all presages what is called the double cataclysm by the alchemists, also called Armageddon, the eschaton, the end of days, the end of time, in many of the traditions. It represents this dissolution back into primordial chaos of this world. And this same type of event is described in the flood of Noah, back in the book of Genesis. You see the waters above and the waters below commingled with the waters that are here. This harkens back to the creation story in the book of Genesis, when the waters were separated, when the Lord God separated the waters from the waters, and he instantiated the firmament and held aloft these waters one from the other, separated them into their various forms. Well, during the flood of Noah, these waters were allowed to seep into the earth as we know it, and everything was dissolved back into primordial chaos once again, and out of that arose a new order of the ages. Well, the same thing is being presaged here once again by this symbolic reference to 3-eye Atlas for those with eyes to see, the third eye, the pineal gland, the spiritual sight. For those with spiritual sight, this is invoking the archetype of Atlas and the collapse of the world pole and perhaps the dissolution back into chaos. Is this going to be that ultimate event that we know as the eschaton, or the end of days, the end of time, the time of revelation? I don't know. I don't think that's the case, but it is a type of presaging such an event. They are doing everything in their power to invoke this catastrophe, this double cataclysm, onto the earth so that they could arise on the other side as the new rulers or the new gods of this place. Of course, I'm speaking of these dark occultists who run things at the top of the power structure in this world. That is most certainly what they want. They want to bring into being this cataclysm. They're trying to provoke Armageddon, the eschaton, the end of days. We've discussed this on prior broadcasts. This is most certainly what they seek to do. So they're invoking this archetype with this object, with all of these celestial alignments and this interstellar object being present here at this time. They're trying to leverage that energy to bring about a catastrophic transformational change to the world on the other side of which they can emerge with their new world order. They seek to ride out the destruction in an ark of safety, and they are building underground bases around the world to hide in, bunkers. They think they'll be safe. That won't keep them safe from the things to come. All of these things have been represented in mythology, in philosophy, in religious contexts. Let's give a little bit more detail on the archetype of Atlas here. Atlas was the Titan god who bore the sky aloft. He personified the quality of endurance. Atlas was a leader of the Titans in their war against Zeus, and after their defeat he was condemned to carry the heavens upon his shoulders. According to others, he was instead, or later appointed, the guardian of the pillars which held the earth and sky asunder. Atlas was also the god who instructed mankind in the art of astronomy, a tool which was used by sailors in navigation and farmers in measuring the seasons. These roles were often combined, and Atlas becomes the god who turns the heavens on their axis, causing the stars to revolve. Heracles encountered the Titan during his quest for the golden apples of Hesperides. He agreed to take the heavens upon his shoulders, while Atlas fetched the apples. The hero also slew the Hesperian dragon, which in vase paintings appears as the Titan's tormentor, and built 2 great pillars at the ends of the earth, perhaps to relieve the Titan of his labor. In a late myth, Atlas was transformed into the stony Atlas Mountain by Perseus using the Gorgon's head. So I'm going to pause for a moment. So now we are also told here that a substitution took up the job of holding the sky aloft in Atlas's place, while Atlas was sent for the golden apples of Hesperides. And also, he slew the dragon, the Hesperian dragon. All of these things are invoking other mythological stories and are hearkening back to the principles of the Kabbalah once again. You have this notion of a serpent, and we've talked about this in the past. This represents the figures in the Bible known as Behemoth and Leviathan, the combination thereof, the masculine and the feminine side of that, relating directly to Samael and Lilith, and their pairing together would bring about the destruction of the earth, if they were ever allowed to do so. And of course, you always have the other mythological figure, represented here by Heracles and also Atlas, as defeating the dragon and holding the sky aloft. But the connotation here is, if Atlas leaves his post, if the world mountain or the world pole collapses, it will bring about this ultimate destruction. It will allow this dragon figure, this reptilian archetype, to be loosed into the primordial chaos that it would create here. And then what happens? Well, of course, at some point, someone's going to have to take up the job again of holding the worlds apart and the separation thereof. And then, on the other side of that, will emerge a new order of the ages once again. You could see what's being inferred in the archetypes present here. Now, you could look at all of this stuff as being allegorical. I'm not literally suggesting that this is what's going to happen, that the sky will fall. The sky is falling. Chicken Little told us that. You see, this is all the archetype present in many of these old stories. And it's present in the biblical cosmology as well. We have it right there. It's represented in the religious context of what we would call the eschaton. It's the end of the age, the end of the world as we know it, the end of time, the end of days. You could call it whatever you want. But this is the archetype being invoked by the media attention to this 3-eye atlas object, if you want to call it an object. And are they planning on trying to leverage this energetic principle that this thing will create in order to bring about massive changes here on Earth? You bet your bottom dollar they will do so. How that's going to look, I don't know. Will it be something that's blatantly obvious, or will they craft some type of a story, a Project Bluebeam type story of a mock alien invasion or some such thing to get it done? I don't know. It's all speculative. They could just quietly utilize the energies in the background to affect human consciousness in ways we don't conceive of. And I think that's a more likely scenario to see, where they will leverage these principles to try to craft this narrative of the end of the world. They will use the blueprint that they've been leveraging against us to affect the minds of the masses to accepting that this is inevitable, much as presented in the book of Revelation in the Bible. It's all going to look very different from what's been described, because when you look in the book of Revelation, what you need to realize is John the Revelator was telling you what he saw in the spiritual worlds that was happening. Now, physically, in the material world in which we live, things will look much different than that. But the archetypes are ever present, aren't they? And maybe, in those spiritual realms, some of these things may be observable to those who are able to peer into that. I don't claim to have that ability. But there are some who claim to have that ability, and I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they're charlatans. Maybe they do know some things. I don't have the answers to that. But what I do know is this crafting of a narrative and a counter-narrative surrounding this 3-eye atlas object is all part of a psychological operation of sorts to get you looking at the potential of an end times catastrophe occurring here on Earth. And of course, it's always about transmutation of the image of man, as everything else. So you could see the primary narrative here is we have this interstellar object. It's a comet. They'll tell you it's just a comet. It's a natural object. It behaves strangely. There's your narrative. And then they craft the counter-narrative. Well, it might be an extraterrestrial object. We think it might be an alien mothership or some such thing. And you see them hyping up all of this around that counter-narrative as well. So you have people looking at this and saying, it's nothing. And then on the other side, in the ufology movement and in some of the other alternative media places, they're really giving this a lot of attention and focus and finding details about it that seem to align with it being an artificial object. And that's your counter-narrative, always. With these psychological operations, this is how they do it. They give you narrative and counter-narrative. I could describe it a little better in some other terms. We'll call it the Hegelian dialectic at play. They will give you thesis, and they will give you antithesis in order to create synthesis. It's all about steering the human mind in a particular direction. And of course, they want to bring about this end of days. They are actively trying to provoke the eschaton. Like I said, we've covered that before in this broadcast on past episodes. They are purposely trying to provoke that. They're trying to invoke these energies into bringing about this catastrophic change in the world, because somehow or another these dark occultists who run things at the top of the power structure think that somehow they're going to be able to ride out these earth-changing events and emerge on the other side as a new civilization, a new world order, and that they will be the gods of this new world order. Now, a lot of people are probably saying this is a bridge too far. This is too much. It's all nonsense. Maybe it is all nonsense, but that's irrelevant. What you need to understand is, regardless of what you think about it, there are people in positions of power in this world that very much believe in these concepts and these precepts, and the things they do to act upon their beliefs in these things will affect all of us. So it's important that you know it, you understand it, and you can see what it is they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. And once again, they always invoke mythological archetypes to bring about this change in man's image of himself and his place in the universe. That's what this is all about. You could go back and look at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI International, study that they did on the changing images of man, performed by Margaret Mead and others back in the 1970s. And then you will understand a little better why they want to change man's image of himself and his place in this universe. And it all has to do with a very small, select few people at the topmost levels of the power structure in this world, trying to instantiate their power even further into this world and control all aspects of human life from cradle to grave, 24/7, 365. And they think they could do it through the use of advanced technologies, in combination with utilizing the old occult sciences that they know about that you do not. And they leverage these energies against us. And they think they could get it done and become the gods on the other side of all of it. And this is just one more symbol that they are using to leverage those energies against the masses. 3-eye Atlas. And if you have the eyes to see, then you know what's being inferred in the language surrounding this object in the sky. So I hope you find some value in this broadcast tonight. I think these ideas are important to explore, especially as we inch ever closer to what they're calling UFO disclosure. It's all caught up in this. There are very real things that you can call UFOs or UAP at this point. It's a real phenomenon. It's a series of different phenomena, actually. Some of it's man-made. Some of it goes beyond being human-made. Some of it represents different intelligences from beyond what we could observe here in our physical reality, the nature of which nobody really knows for certain. But we can make some good educated guesses based upon what we know about the old natural sciences or occult sciences, the things that have been recorded by those in the secret societies and hidden away from the masses. We can make some observations based upon that, and we can know some things. It's more of an extra-dimensional type of a phenomenon, more so than an extraterrestrial one, in my estimation. But there may be an extraterrestrial element to it as well. It's hard to say. I don't have the answers to all of that. I am exploring these questions just as every one of you are. I'm just making observations based upon the things that I've learned through my years of study and observation of this, looking at the writings of the old occult sciences, looking at the things that they knew, that they teach within the secret schools, and the things that have emerged in the greater zeitgeist, these little bits of information, which I refer to as the synchromystic metadata, that affects human consciousness in ways that we could hardly conceive of without having the eyes to see. The third eye, the 3-eye, relating to the mythological archetype that is Atlas, the collapse of the world pole, the collapse of civilization, the dissolution of it all into primordial chaos, and the reemergence on the other side of a new world order. That's what's being inferred and invoked in this news story. The news, taking your mind north, east, west, and south. They want to keep you distracted. They don't want you to be able to focus on the inherent meanings, the hidden inherent meanings therein. They want to drag your mind to the north, east, west, and south, and they do so with many of these news stories. And of course, I'll let you go and look into the mythological roots of the word media. And then you'll know a little bit more about what it's really about. Anyway, that is all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I'll remind you, I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one now.